While serving a drink at a luxury party, the waitress was shocked to recognize the millionaire. It was her husband, who died in a fire 10 years ago. She walked closer and the crystal champagne flutes clinked like wind chimes as Lauren Evans balanced the silver tray with trembling hands. At 35, she'd mastered the art of becoming invisible, the perfect skill for a woman who spent her evenings serving Austin's elite, while they discussed million-dollar deals as casually as the weather. "Excuse me, ma'am, Dame Pérignon," she offered, with the practiced smile she'd perfected over a decade of high-end catering gigs. The woman in the sequined Valentino dress barely glanced at her before plucking a glass from the tray, her diamond bracelet catching the light from the crystal chandelier. Lauren's calloused fingers, evidence of countless nights washing dishes and scrubbing floors, gripped the tray tighter. This was just another Saturday night at the Pemberton Estate, another chance to earn the money that would keep Luna in her advanced placement classes and maybe, if she was lucky, put something aside for college applications. The September evening air drifted through the open French doors, carrying with it the sound of orchestral music and the low murmur of conversations about offshore investments and vacation homes in the Hamptons. Lauren moved through the crowd like a ghost, refilling glasses and clearing empty plates. Always watching, always careful not to make eye contact for too long. "Did you hear about the Morrison acquisition?" A woman's voice floated over the ambient noise. "Leonard Blackwood just bought them out for $2 billion, cash." Lauren's hand froze halfway to refilling a glass. Leonard Blackwood. The name had been splashed across business magazines for months. The construction magnate who'd seemingly appeared from nowhere 8 years ago and built an empire that spanned from Texas to Dubai. "That man's got the Midas touch," someone replied. "Everything he touches turns to gold." "Well, he's certainly got the look of success," the woman continued with a laugh. "And that wife of his, Rachel's absolutely stunning. They make quite the power couple." The blood drained from Lauren's face as she scanned the crowd, searching for the source of the conversation. Her eyes moved frantically across the sea of tuxedos and evening gowns until they landed on a group of businessmen near the marble fireplace. And there, standing with his back to her, was a man in an impeccably tailored black suit, even from behind. Something about his posture made her stomach lurch, the way he held his shoulders, the slight tilt of his head when he laughed. It was achingly familiar. "More champagne, please," a guest requested. A guest. Startling her back to the present, Lauren nodded mutely and made her way toward the group, her heart hammering against her ribs like a caged bird. The man turned as she approached, and Lauren's world tilted on its axis. Green eyes, penetrating. Intelligent green eyes that had once looked at her with love and promises of forever. The same eyes that had closed for the last time 10 years ago, in a coffin she'd paid for with money she didn't have. The scar on his right chin, the one he'd gotten falling off his bike at age 12, the one she'd traced with her finger on countless lazy Sunday mornings, was still there, faded but unmistakable. Alan Carter, her husband, her dead husband. The champagne flute slipped from her numb fingers, shattering against the marble floor in a cascade of crystal and golden liquid. The conversation stopped as heads turned toward the commotion. "Oh God, I'm so sorry," Lauren stammered, dropping to her knees to collect the fragments with shaking hands. Blood beaded on her palm where a sharp piece had cut her, but she barely felt it. "Don't worry about it, honey," a woman's voice said from above. "These things happen." Lauren looked up to see a breathtakingly beautiful woman with platinum blonde hair and kind blue eyes extending a cloth napkin. This had to be Rachel, the wife Alan had mentioned in the conversation she'd overheard. The woman he'd been with for 8 years. 8 years. Lauren's mind reeled as she accepted the napkin. Luna had been 7 when Alan died. For 8 years, she'd struggled to keep food on the table and a roof over their heads, while he'd been living in luxury with another woman. "I'm fine, really," Lauren managed, her voice barely above a whisper. She pressed the napkin to her bleeding palm and forced herself to look at Alan, at Leonard. He was staring at her with a mixture of confusion and something else she couldn't quite identify. His hair was now salt and pepper gray instead of the rich brown she remembered, and his face was tanned and well-fed. He wore a Rolex that probably cost more than she made in a year. "Have we met?" he asked, his voice exactly as she remembered it. Warm, smooth, with just a hint of Texas drawl. "You look familiar." Lauren's throat closed. She wanted to scream, to demand answers, to ask him how he could have done this to her and Luna. Instead, she shook her head. "I don't think so, sir. I just work for the catering company." His eyes lingered on her face for another moment, before Rachel slipped her arm through his, diamonds glittering on her ring finger, a ring that was easily 5 times the size of the simple band Lauren had worn for their brief marriage. "Darling, the Hendersons want to discuss the Miami project," Rachel said, her voice carrying the cultured accent of old money. "Shall we?" "Of course," Alan Leonard replied, but his gaze remained fixed on Lauren. "Take care of that cut," he said softly. Lauren watched them walk away, Alan's hand resting possessively on Rachel's lower back. She heard fragments of their conversation as they moved through the crowd, mentions of their estate in Beverly Hills, their upcoming trip to Dubai, their 8th wedding anniversary next month. 8th anniversary. The timeline made her sick. Alan had been declared dead 10 years ago, which meant he'd married Rachel just 2 years later. 2 years after she'd buried an empty coffin and sold everything they'd owned to pay his debts. The bathroom? She needed to get to the bathroom before she threw up right there on the Pemberton's imported Italian marble. Lauren stumbled through the crowd, past the string quartet and the ice sculpture, until she found the powder room tucked away near the library. She barely made it to the toilet before her stomach emptied itself, 10 years of grief and struggle pouring out of her in violent heaves. When the retching finally stopped, she sat on the cold tile floor and pressed her forehead against the cool porcelain. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely wipe her face with the monogrammed hand towel. Alan was alive. Not just alive, but thriving. While she'd worked 3 jobs to keep Luna fed and clothed. While she'd cried herself to sleep, wondering how she'd pay for school supplies. While she'd worn shoes with holes in them because Luna needed new ones. He'd been building an empire. The door to the powder room opened, and Lauren quickly stood, smoothing her black uniform and trying to compose herself. 2 women entered, their conversation already in progress. "I still can't believe how young Rachel was when she married Julian," one of them was saying. "She couldn't have been more than 25. "Well, you know what they say about May-December romances," the other replied with a laugh. "Though I suppose it worked out for her in the end. When Julian died, she inherited everything." Lauren's blood ran cold. Julian. They were talking about Rachel's first husband. "It's funny how life works out," the first woman continued, touching up her lipstick in the mirror. "She loses her first husband in that terrible car accident. And then 2 years later she meets Leonard at some charity function. Now look at them. They're like American royalty. I heard Julian's business partner disappeared around the same time." The second woman said conspiratorially, "Something about embezzlement. Poor Julian probably never saw it coming." The women finished their touch-ups and left, their voices fading down the hallway. Lauren remained frozen by the sink, pieces of a horrifying puzzle clicking into place in her mind. Julian, Rachel's first husband, a business partner who disappeared after embezzling money. Alan had been in construction. He'd had a business partner. Her reflection in the mirror looked like a ghost, pale, hollow-eyed, haunted. But behind the shock and grief, something else was beginning to kindle, something hot and fierce and long overdue. She pulled out her phone with trembling fingers and typed Julian Morgan obituary into the search bar. The results made her knees weak. Julian Morgan, 45, prominent Austin businessman and philanthropist, died tragically in a single-car accident on Highway 35. He is survived by his wife Rachel and his business partner Alan Carter. The article was dated 3 months before Alan's supposed death, 3 months before the fire that had consumed his office and allegedly killed him. Lauren closed her eyes and saw Luna's face. Bright, determined Luna, who studied by candlelight when they couldn't afford the electric bill, who wore secondhand clothes without complaint, who dreamed of becoming a doctor while her father's death benefits had been eaten up by mysterious debts. When she opened her eyes again, the woman in the mirror looked different. Still pale, still shaken, but no longer broken. Alan Carter had made the mistake of his life. He'd underestimated the woman he'd left for dead. Lauren's hands shook as she unlocked the door to their modest apartment at 2:47 a.m. The contrast between the Pemberton Estate and her reality hit her like a physical blow. The peeling paint on the hallway walls, the flickering fluorescent light that the landlord refused to fix, the the smell of her neighbor's late-night cooking seeping through paper-thin walls, she kicked off her sensible black flats and padded barefoot across the worn linoleum to Luna's room. Her daughter was fast asleep, textbooks still scattered across her desk where she'd been studying for her app biology exam. Even in sleep, Luna's face held that determined expression that reminded Lauren so much of herself at that age, back when she still believed the world was fair. Lauren gently pulled a blanket over her daughter's shoulders and whispered, "Sweet dreams, baby girl." The irony wasn't lost on her that Luna was exactly the same age Lauren had been when she'd met Alan Carter at that construction site, where she'd been delivering lunch to her father's crew. Back in her own room, Lauren fired up her ancient laptop, a refurbished model she'd bought 3 years ago when Luna needed it for school projects. The Wi-Fi connection crawled at the speed of molasses, but eventually, the search results for Leonard Blackwood filled her screen. What she found made her stomach churn. Forbes estimated his net worth at $3.2 billion. Blackwood Construction had headquarters in Dallas, Miami, and Dubai. There were photos of him at charity galas, cutting ribbons at hospital openings, shaking hands with politicians. In every single picture, he looked exactly like the man she'd married, just older, richer, and infinitely more polished. The business articles painted him as a self-made entrepreneur who'd emerged from obscurity 8 years ago with an innovative approach to sustainable construction. His first major project had been a luxury hotel in Austin, funded, according to one profile, by private investors and offshore partnerships. Lauren's blood boiled. She knew exactly where that initial funding had come from. She clicked through dozens of photos, each one a knife twist in her chest. Leonard and Rachel at the Met Gala. Leonard receiving a humanitarian award. Leonard and Rachel on their yacht off the coast of Santorini. Their life looked like something out of a magazine. All private jets and penthouse views and designer everything. Meanwhile, Lauren had spent the last decade wearing secondhand clothes and clipping coupons just to afford Luna's school supplies. Her laptop wheezed as she opened another tab and searched for Alan Carter Death Austin Fire. The old newspaper articles painted a tragic picture that she remembered all too well, because she'd lived through every horrifying moment of it. Local businessman dies in office fire. Alan Carter, 30, owner of Carter Construction, was found dead in his office after an electrical fire consumed the building on Riverside Drive. Fire marshal investigators determined the blaze started around 11 p.m., when Carter was apparently working late. His body was discovered by firefighters in what remained of his office. He is survived by his wife Lauren and daughter Luna. She remembered that night with crystal clarity. Alan had called her around 10:30, saying he needed to finish some paperwork and would be home late. She'd fallen asleep on the couch watching an old movie, only to be awakened at 3 a.m. by police officers at her door. The identification had been difficult. The body was badly burned, they'd told her gently. They'd relied on dental records and the wedding ring Alan always wore. Lauren had been too devastated to question anything. She'd trusted the system, trusted that the authorities knew what they were doing. What a fool she'd been. Her phone buzzed with a text from her supervisor at the catering company. "Great job tonight, Lauren. The Pembertons specifically requested you for their holiday party next month. You're building quite a reputation." Lauren stared at the message, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. Building a reputation. If only they knew what reputation she was really planning to build. She spent the next 3 hours diving deeper into Leonard Blackwood's life, taking screenshots and making notes in a composition notebook she'd grabbed from Luna's school supplies. Every detail mattered now. Every connection, every timeline, every inconsistency. The most damning discovery came when she cross-referenced the timeline of Julian Morgan's death with Alan's supposed death. Julian had died on March 15th in a single car accident on Highway 35, allegedly falling asleep at the wheel after a late business meeting. Alan's office fire had occurred exactly 3 months later. On June 15th, 3 months, just enough time to plan the perfect disappearance. She found Rachel's social media accounts next. Though they were carefully curated and mostly private, the public photos showed a woman living her best life. Charity luncheons, spa days, shopping trips to Paris and Milan. There were no photos from before 8 years ago, as if Rachel Morgan Blackwood had been born the day she married Leonard. But Lauren was patient. She'd learned patience during 10 years of scraping by. 10 years of making every dollar stretch until it screamed. She found an old Society page article about Julian and Rachel's wedding, a lavish affair at the Four Seasons with 500 guests. Rachel had been radiant in a custom Vera Wang gown, her new husband 15 years her senior and clearly smitten. According to the article, they'd met at a charity function for children's literacy. Julian was described as a widower with no children who'd found love again with the young events coordinator. Sweet story, if it wasn't built on lies and manipulation. "Mom?" Luna's voice made Lauren jump. Her daughter stood in the doorway, rubbing sleep from her eyes. "It's almost 6 in the morning. Did you just get home?" Lauren quickly closed the laptop. "The event ran late, sweetheart. You know how these fancy parties can be. The cleaning alone takes hours." Luna frowned, studying her mother's face with those sharp eyes that missed nothing. "You look weird. Are you okay?" "Just tired, baby. You should get ready for school." "It's Sunday, Mom." Lauren blinked, disoriented. She'd been so absorbed in her research that she'd lost track of time completely. "Right, Sunday. Sorry, It was a long night." Luna padded into the kitchen and started making coffee with the efficiency of someone who'd been taking care of herself, and often her mother, for years. "The Hendersons called yesterday about babysitting their twins next weekend. I told them yes. Is that okay?" "Of course." Lauren accepted the mug of coffee gratefully. Wrapping her hands around its warmth, Luna had been babysitting since she was 13, contributing her earnings to their household fund without complaint. Another sacrifice that Alan's betrayal had forced on their daughter. "Mom, seriously, what's wrong?" Luna sat across from her at their tiny kitchen table. The same table they'd eaten countless meals of ramen noodles and peanut butter sandwiches when money was especially tight. "You look like you've seen a ghost." The irony of that statement almost made Lauren laugh hysterically. She had seen a ghost that was very much alive and living in luxury, while his daughter wore shoes with holes in the soles. "Just processing the evening," Lauren said carefully. "Sometimes these events, they make you think about things, about how different life could have been." Luna reached across the table and squeezed her mother's hand. "Hey, we're doing okay. I mean, we're not rich, but we've got each other. And next year when I graduate, I'll get that scholarship to what? You'll see. Everything's going to work out." Lauren's heart broke a little more. Luna was so optimistic, so determined to make the best of their circumstances. She had no idea that her father, the man she'd mourned for half her life, was alive and wealthy beyond imagination. "Luna," Lauren said softly, "what if I told you that everything we believed about your father's death might not be true?" Her daughter's eyes widened. "What do you mean?" Lauren caught herself before she said too much. Luna didn't deserve to be dragged into this nightmare. Not yet. Not until Lauren had figured out exactly what she was going to do about it. "Nothing, sweetheart. I'm just tired and saying things that don't make sense. Why don't you go back to bed for a few more hours?" But Luna's expression had sharpened. "Mom, if there's something about Dad that I should know." "There isn't," Lauren said firmly. "I promise you, when there's something you need to know, I'll tell you, but right now, I need you to trust me and let me handle this." After Luna reluctantly returned to her room, Lauren sat alone in their cramped kitchen, staring at the framed photo on the counter. The three of them at Luna's 5th birthday party, just months before Alan's death. They'd been so happy then, or at least she'd thought they were. Looking at Alan's face in that photo now, she wondered how she'd missed the signs. Had he already been planning his escape? Had he looked at his wife and daughter and seen obstacles to the life he really wanted? The questions burned through her like acid, but they also crystallized something else. Determination. Alan Carter had stolen 10 years of their lives. He'd forced Luna to grow up poor while he lived like a king. He'd made Lauren believe she was a widow, that she'd failed as a wife, that somehow his death was connected to her inadequacy. Well, now she knew the truth, and she was going to make sure he paid for every single lie. 3 weeks later, Lauren stood in front of the bathroom mirror at CV's, a box of auburn hair dye in one hand and a pair of wire-rimmed glasses in the other. The transformation had to be subtle, but effective. Different enough that Alan wouldn't immediately recognize her, but not so dramatic that she looked like she was wearing a costume. The hair dye darkened her natural blonde to a rich brown with reddish undertones. The glasses, which she'd gotten with a mild prescription for reading, changed the shape of her face. She'd also lost 15 pounds through a combination of stress and deliberately skipping meals. Money that would have gone to her own food was better spent on Luna's college prep courses. Most importantly, She'd obtained a social security card and driver's license under the name Lauren Morgan, using the identity of a woman who'd died in infancy 35 years ago. It had cost her $2,000, money she'd borrowed against Luna's college fund. But she'd learned that dead baby identities were surprisingly easy to acquire if you knew the right people in Austin's service industry. The backstory was simple. Lauren Morgan was a widow from San Antonio, whose husband had died in a car accident 3 years ago. She had excellent references from families in the area, fabricated but professional looking, and she needed work to support herself while she figured out her next steps in life. "You sure about this reference?" asked Maria, the woman who cleaned houses for half of Austin's wealthy elite. She'd helped Lauren create the false work history in exchange for $500 cash. "These people, they sometimes check up on things." "I'm sure," Lauren had replied. "If anyone calls, you worked with me for 2 years cleaning the Henderson mansion, and I was reliable, thorough, and kept to myself. That's all you need to say." Now, staring at her reflection in the CV's mirror, Lauren barely recognized herself. The woman looking back at her was tired, older, worn down by life's hardships. It was perfect. She looked exactly like the kind of person who would be invisible in a wealthy household, competent enough to trust with their belongings, unremarkable enough to forget. The job posting had appeared on an exclusive domestic staffing website, seeking experienced housekeeper for Beverly Hills Estate. Live-in position, excellent compensation for the right candidate, discretion and professionalism essential, references required. Lauren had submitted her application as Lauren Morgan, along with her fabricated references and a cover letter that emphasized her reliability and attention to detail. The phone interview had gone smoothly. She'd spoken with Rachel Blackwood's personal assistant, a harried-sounding woman named Catherine, who seemed more interested in filling the position quickly than in conducting a thorough background check. "Mrs. Blackwood travels frequently," Catherine had explained, "and Mr. Blackwood works very long hours. They need someone who can maintain the household without constant supervision. The previous housekeeper left rather suddenly to care for a sick relative. Or more likely, Lauren thought, they'd discovered something they shouldn't have and been paid to disappear." "I understand completely," Lauren had said, modulating her voice to sound tired but professional. "I'm looking for a stable position where I can do good work without drama. I've had enough drama to last a lifetime." "Perfect. When can you start?" And just like that, Lauren Morgan had been hired sight unseen to work in the house of the man who'd destroyed her life. The flight to Los Angeles felt surreal. Lauren had never been on a plane before. She and Alan had honeymooned at a lake house in the hill country, and family vacations had consisted of camping trips to state parks. Now she sat in coach, watching Texas disappear beneath her, while her stomach churned with equal parts terror and anticipation. The Beverly Hills mansion was everything she'd expected, and more. The Uber driver had to stop at a security gate where Lauren's name was checked against a list before the massive iron doors swung open to reveal a circular driveway lined with perfectly manicured palm trees. The house itself looked like something from a movie, all white stone and floor-to-ceiling windows. With a 3-car garage that probably cost more than most people's entire homes, Catherine met her at the front door, a thin woman in her 50s with the kind of precisely styled hair that screamed expensive salon. "Ms. Morgan, welcome to the Blackwood residence. I'm Catherine Walsh, Mrs. Blackwood's personal assistant. Thank you for this opportunity," Lauren said, gripping her single suitcase tighter. Everything she'd brought could fit in one bag. She was supposed to be a woman who'd lost everything, after all. "Let me show you around," Catherine said briskly. "The family is traveling this week, so it's perfect timing for you to get acclimated without interruption." The tour was a study in obscene wealth. The marble floors were imported from Italy. The artwork on the walls included what looked like original pieces worth more than Lauren had earned in her entire lifetime. The kitchen alone was larger than her and Luna's entire apartment. With professional-grade appliances and a wine refrigerator that probably contained bottles worth thousands of dollars each. "This is your room," Catherine said, opening a door near the back of the house. Even the staff quarters were luxurious. A queen-sized bed, private bathroom, and sitting area with a flat-screen TV. The window looked out onto an infinity pool that seemed to stretch into the Los Angeles skyline. "It's beautiful," Lauren murmured, and she meant it. The irony was devastating. She was living better as Alan's housekeeper than she ever had as his wife. Mrs. Blackwood prefers a light hand with cleaning, Catherine continued, handing her a thick binder. Everything you need to know is in here. Schedules, preferences, contact information. They entertain frequently, so there will be additional duties when they're hosting. The house manager, James, handles the grounds and maintenance. You'll meet him tomorrow, that night. Alone in her luxurious staff quarters, Lauren opened the binder and began studying her new employers' lives in forensic detail. Rachel's schedule was packed with charity boards, shopping appointments, and social engagements. Leonard's was more sparse but included regular business trips to Dubai, Miami, and Austin. A detail that made Lauren's blood run cold. He was still going to Austin, still conducting business in the city where he'd supposedly died, where his wife and daughter struggled to survive. The personal preferences section was particularly illuminating. Rachel liked her coffee with oat milk, and exactly 1 teaspoon of honey. She had standing appointments at a Beverly Hills spa every Tuesday and Thursday. She was allergic to lilies but loved white roses. She preferred the house temperature at exactly 72 degrees, and would notice if it varied by even 1 degree. Leonard's preferences were simpler but more telling. He took his coffee black, worked out every morning at 5 a.m. in the home gym, and had a standing weekly poker game on Thursday nights with business associates. He traveled with a specific set of luggage, and always packed his own toiletries because he was particular about such things. Most interesting was a note about his office. Mr. Blackwood's home office is strictly off-limits. He maintains his own files and cleaning schedule for this space. Do not enter without express permission. Lauren smiled grimly. Of course he did. That's where he kept the evidence of his crimes. Over the next few days, she settled into the rhythm of maintaining the Blackwood household. It was surprisingly easy work. The house was already immaculate, and with the family away, her duties consisted mainly of keeping everything perfect for their return. She used the time to explore, memorizing the layout, and identifying potential hiding places for surveillance equipment. The home security system was state-of-the-art, but Lauren had learned during her weeks of preparation that the cameras had blind spots, especially in the staff areas where privacy was expected. The most valuable discovery came when she was dusting the living room and found a stack of business magazines on the coffee table. Leonard Blackwood graced the cover of Forbes. Looking every inch the successful billionaire, the article inside was titled, "The Phoenix Rises: How Leonard Blackwood Built an Empire from Nothing." From nothing. Lauren had to bite her tongue to keep from laughing bitterly. She knew exactly what nothing he'd built his empire from. The stolen money from Julian Morgan's business, the insurance payout from his own faked death, and God knew what other crimes he'd committed along the way. But the most damning detail was buried in the middle of the article. Blackwood credits his success to his ability to see opportunities where others see obstacles, and his willingness to make hard decisions when necessary. He and his wife Rachel, whom he married after tragically losing his first wife in an accident, are now among Los Angeles' most prominent philanthropic couples. First wife, he'd told people she was dead. In his version of events, Lauren Carter had never survived that night 10 years ago. She died with him in that fire, leaving behind nothing but a tragic love story that probably made him seem more sympathetic to the social circles he now moved in. The bastard had killed her off completely, erasing her existence so thoroughly that he could start fresh with his stolen fortune and his stolen identity. Well, Lauren thought, as she carefully returned the magazine to its exact position on the coffee table. He was about to learn that some ghosts don't stay buried. The dead had a way of coming back to haunt the living, and Lauren Carter, now Lauren Morgan, was very much alive and angrier than she'd ever been in her life. Lauren's phone buzzed at 3:47 a.m. Pacific Time, 6:47 a.m. in Austin. Luna's name flashed on the screen, and Lauren's heart immediately jumped into panic mode. Her daughter never called this early unless something was wrong. "Mom," Luna's voice was excited, not distressed. "Sorry to wake you, but I couldn't wait to tell you. I got in." "Got in where, sweetheart?" Lauren whispered, stepping out onto the small balcony attached to her staff quarters. The Los Angeles skyline glittered in the pre-dawn darkness, a stark contrast to the modest view from their Austin apartment window. St. Catherine's Preparatory. They had a last-minute scholarship opening, and Mrs. Henderson recommended me. "Mom, it's one of the best private schools in Austin. The college placement rate is 98%. Lauren's chest tightened. St. Catherine's was where Austin's elite sent their children. The same families she'd been serving champagne to just weeks ago. The irony was almost too much to bear. "That's wonderful, baby. When do you start?" "Monday. I know it's short notice, but they're letting me transfer mid-semester because of my grades." "Mom, this could change everything for us. The connections alone." "Luna," Lauren interrupted gently. "Private school means uniforms, books, fees. Are you sure this scholarship covers everything?" "It does, full ride, plus a stipend for supplies. The donor wants to remain anonymous, but Mrs. Henderson said they specifically requested a student who'd overcome significant hardship." After hanging up, Lauren stood on the balcony for a long time, staring at the city lights. Luna would be attending school with the children of people like Leonard and Rachel Blackwood, children who'd never known what it was like to choose between groceries and electricity, who took luxury for granted. But maybe that was exactly what Luna needed. Maybe it was time for their family to reclaim what had been stolen from them. The Blackwoods returned that afternoon in a flurry of designer luggage and jet lag complaints. Lauren heard them before she saw them, Rachel's voice echoing through the marble foyer as she directed the driver about her bags. "Catherine, the flowers in the entrance are completely wrong. I specifically said white roses, not cream. And why does it smell like lemon cleaner in here? You know I prefer the lavender scent." Lauren waited in the kitchen, her hands steady as she prepared the welcome home refreshments Catherine had requested. When Leonard's voice joined Rachel's, that familiar timbre she'd once found so comforting, every muscle in her body tensed. "The house looks perfect," he was saying. "You found someone good." "I hope so. The last 3 were disasters. This one comes highly recommended, though. Widow from San Antonio. Very experienced with high-end households." Their footsteps approached the kitchen, and Lauren took a deep breath, schooling her features into the expression of polite deference she'd perfected. "Mr. and Mrs. Blackwood," she said, rising from where she'd been arranging a fruit platter. "Welcome home. I'm Lauren Morgan." For a split second, Leonard's eyes met hers, and Lauren saw something flicker across his face. Confusion, perhaps, or the faint stirring of a memory he couldn't quite place. But then Rachel stepped forward, and the moment passed. "Miss Morgan, lovely to meet you properly. Catherine says you've been managing beautifully while we were away." Rachel Blackwood was even more stunning in person than in photographs. Her platinum blonde hair was perfectly styled despite the long flight, and her skin had the kind of flawless glow that came from expensive treatments and a life free from real worry. She wore a cream-colored Chanel suit that probably cost more than Lauren's annual rent. "Thank you, Mrs. Blackwood. I hope everything meets your expectations." "It does indeed." Leonard stepped closer, and Lauren caught a whiff of his cologne, different from what he'd worn during their marriage, more expensive, but it still made her stomach clench with unwanted memories. "Catherine mentioned you're from San Antonio." "Yes, sir. I moved here after my husband passed. Fresh start, you know how it is." Something in Leonard's expression shifted. A flicker of what might have been sympathy. "I'm sorry for your loss. What did your husband do?" The question felt like a test, though Lauren couldn't be sure if he was suspicious or simply making conversation. "Construction," she said simply. "Small company, mostly residential work, nothing like your empire." "Of course. Construction's good, honest work," Leonard said, and for a moment, his voice carried an echo of the man she'd once known. The man who'd built their first bookshelf with his own hands, who'd taught her to read blueprints over morning coffee. But that man was dead, had been dead for 10 years. Even if his body was still walking around wearing expensive suits. "I'll let you both get settled," Lauren said. "Dinner will be ready at 7, as Mrs. Blackwood requested." Over the following days, Lauren fell into the rhythm of invisibility that domestic staff perfected. She learned that Leonard left for his downtown office at exactly 7:15 a.m. after his workout, returning between 6 and 8 p.m. depending on his schedule. Rachel's days were a whirlwind of charity committee meetings, spa appointments, and shopping expeditions with friends whose names Lauren recognized from society pages. Most importantly, she began to piece together the scope of Leonard's criminal empire. It started with an overheard phone conversation on Tuesday morning. Leonard was in his office, the forbidden sanctuary she hadn't yet figured out how to access, and his voice carried through the closed door as she dusted the hallway. "The Austin project needs to be accelerated," he was saying. "I don't care what it costs." That land deal has to close before the environmental survey is complete. Environmental survey. Lauren made a mental note as she continued her work. Marcus, I've been patient with the Miami situation, but my patience has limits. Either the permits get approved this week, or we find officials who understand the value of cooperation. Bribery. Lauren's hands tightened on her dust cloth. No, absolutely not. We do not put anything in writing about the Dubai arrangement. Some conversations happen face-to-face or not at all. By Thursday, Lauren had heard enough snippets to understand that Leonard Blackwood's business empire was built on a foundation of corruption, bribery, and environmental destruction. But she needed hard evidence, not just overheard conversations. The opportunity came when Rachel announced she'd be spending the weekend at a spa retreat in Santa Barbara. It's a digital detox weekend, she explained to Catherine. No phones, no email. Complete disconnection, Leonard. You'll have to manage without me for 48 whole hours. I think I'll survive, Leonard replied dryly. I might even get some work done without your social committee interrupting every 5 minutes. That Friday evening, Lauren was serving Leonard dinner when her phone buzzed with a text from Luna. Without thinking, she glanced at it, and her blood froze. The message was a photo of Luna with a tall, handsome boy with dark hair and serious brown eyes. The caption read, Mom, meet Elijah. He's in my app chemistry class. We're study partners now. Isn't he cute? Elijah. The name hit Lauren like a physical blow. But it was the boy's face that made her hands shake so badly she nearly dropped the serving tray. Those eyes, that jawline, the way he held his head slightly tilted when he smiled. She'd seen those features before. In old photographs Rachel kept on her dressing table. Photographs of her first husband. Julian Morgan. Ms. Morgan. Leonard's voice seemed to come from very far away. Are you all right? I'm sorry, sir, just tired. Lauren fumbled to put her phone away, but not before Leonard glimpsed the screen. Lovely young people, he commented. Your daughter. Yes, sir. She just started at a new school. She looks happy. What school? Lauren's mouth went dry. St. Catherine's Preparatory. Leonard's fork paused halfway to his mouth. St. Catherine's was where the children of Austin's elite attended school, including, Lauren now realized with growing horror, the orphaned grandson of Julian Morgan. Excellent school, Leonard said carefully. Very prestigious. Your daughter must be quite gifted to receive a scholarship there. The implications crashed over Lauren like a tsunami. Luna was attending school with Julian Morgan's grandson, Julian Morgan, the man Rachel had been married to before she'd married Leonard, Julian Morgan, whose business partner had been Alan Carter. And if Luna was becoming friends with Elijah Morgan, there was only one possible explanation for the scholarship that had randomly become available at exactly the right time. Leonard, Alan, was manipulating events from 3 states away, pulling strings to place Luna in the same social circle as the family he'd destroyed. But why? What possible reason could he have for wanting Luna near the Morgan family? Unless he didn't know. Unless this was some cosmic joke. Fate bringing together the children of his victims without his knowledge. Or unless he knew exactly who Elijah Morgan was, and this was all part of some larger, more twisted game. That night, Lauren lay awake staring at the ceiling, her mind racing through possibilities. She thought about Luna's excited voice on the phone, about the happiness in her daughter's face in that photo. Luna had been isolated for so long, struggling in underfunded public schools where her intelligence made her an outsider. Now she was finally somewhere she belonged, with someone who might understand the weight of family tragedy. But Elijah Morgan wasn't just any boy. He was the grandson of the man Alan had helped destroy. And if he ever learned the truth about Leonard Blackwood's real identity, Luna would be caught in the crossfire. Lauren pulled out her phone and typed a careful message to Luna. He seems very nice, sweetheart. Tell me about his family. The response came back quickly. Sad story, actually. His grandfather died when he was little, and his dad committed suicide a few years later. He lives with his mom's parents now. But he's so smart, Mom. And he's been through stuff like us. He gets it, you know. Lauren closed her eyes, feeling the weight of secrets pressing down on her chest like stones. Julian Morgan's son had killed himself. Luna was befriending Julian Morgan's grandson, and the man responsible for destroying the Morgan family was sleeping just down the hallway, probably dreaming of his next business conquest. The web of connections was becoming impossibly tangled. and Lauren was no longer sure if she was the spider or the fly. 2 weeks later, Lauren was dusting the living room when her phone rang. Luna's contact photo filled the screen, the two of them at Luna's middle school graduation, both grinning despite the second-hand dress Luna wore and the worry lines already forming around Lauren's eyes. "Mom, I have a huge favor to ask," Luna said without preamble. "Can Elijah come over for dinner tomorrow night? We're working on this massive chemistry project together, and it would be so much easier if we could work at home instead of staying late at school." Lauren's hand tightened on the phone. She'd been dreading this moment since she'd first seen Elijah's photo. "Of course, sweetheart. What time?" 6:30. "I'll cook. Well, I'll try to cook. You know how my attempts at anything fancier than spaghetti usually go." Despite everything, Lauren smiled. Luna's culinary disasters were legendary in their household. "I'll help you plan something that won't require the fire department." After hanging up, Lauren stared at her reflection in the spotless chrome surface of the coffee table. Tomorrow night, she would sit across from Julian Morgan's grandson, the boy whose family had been destroyed by the same man she was now serving, and she would have to pretend she knew nothing about any of it. The next evening found her standing in the cramped kitchen of their Austin apartment, helping Luna prepare what they'd optimistically called fancy pasta with chicken. The apartment felt even smaller after weeks in the Beverly Hills mansion, but it also felt real in a way that luxury never could. "He's here," Luna called from the living room, where she'd been anxiously checking the window every 30 seconds. "Mom, remember what I said about not embarrassing me?" "When have I ever embarrassed you?" Lauren asked innocently, smoothing her hair one final time. "Do you want the chronological list or the alphabetical one?" The knock at the door sent Lauren's heart racing. She wiped her palms on her jeans and followed Luna to the entrance, steeling herself for the moment she'd been dreading. Elijah Morgan was taller than he'd appeared in the photos, with the kind of lean build that suggested he'd grown recently and hadn't quite grown into his frame yet. But it was his eyes that stopped Lauren cold. Dark brown, intelligent, and carrying a weight that no 17-year-old should have to bear. He looked so much like Julian, it was uncanny. The same serious expression, the same way of tilting his head slightly when he listened, the same gentle smile that transformed his entire face. "You must be Mrs. Evans," he said, extending his hand with the kind of old-fashioned manners that spoke of careful upbringing. "Thank you so much for having me. Luna talks about you all the time." "All good things, I hope," Lauren managed, accepting his handshake. His grip was firm, confident, the handshake of someone who'd learned early to present himself as more mature than his years. "The best things," Elijah assured her. "She says you're her hero." Luna flushed bright red. "Elijah, you promised you wouldn't say that." "Sorry, but it's true. She told me how you worked 3 jobs to keep her in school after her dad died. That's pretty heroic." The words hit Lauren like a physical blow. 3 jobs. Yes. She'd worked 3 jobs while Alan was living in luxury, building an empire on stolen money and the destruction of families just like the Morgans. "We do what we have to do for our kids," Lauren said quietly. "I'm sure your family understands that." Something flickered across Elijah's face. Pain. Maybe. Or anger. "Yeah. Well, my family's had some complications. But my grandparents are amazing. They took me in after my dad died, never made me feel like a burden." "I'm sorry about your father," Lauren said gently. "Luna mentioned you'd lost him." Elijah's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "He killed himself when I was 14. Couldn't handle what happened to my grandfather's business. Some bastard stole everything from him. Embezzled money, destroyed his reputation, left him with nothing. Dad spent years trying to rebuild, trying to prove Grandpa wasn't the criminal they made him out to be. In the end, it broke him." Lauren felt like she was drowning. Every word was a knife twist of guilt and rage. This boy, this brilliant, grieving boy who was making her daughter happy, was a victim of Alan's crimes just as much as she and Luna were. "That's terrible," she whispered. "I can't imagine." "The worst part is we never found out who did it," Elijah continued, his voice hardening. "Dad was close, though. Right before he died, he told me he'd figured out who his grandfather's partner really was, where he'd gone, but he never got the chance to prove it." Luna reached over and squeezed Elijah's hand. "You don't have to talk about this if it's too hard." "No. It's okay. It actually helps to talk about it with people who understand. Your mom gets it. She knows what it's like to lose someone and have to start over with nothing. Lauren excused herself to check on dinner, but really she needed a moment to compose herself before she broke down completely. In the kitchen, she gripped the edge of the counter and forced herself to breathe. This boy was carrying the same burden she was. The weight of injustice, the burning need for answers, the determination to honor a lost father's memory. The difference was that she knew exactly who was responsible for his pain, and he was searching for ghosts. "Mom," Luna appeared in the kitchen doorway. "Are you okay? You look pale." "I'm fine, sweetheart. Just thinking about how much Elijah reminds me of your father at that age. The same intensity, the same sense of justice." It wasn't entirely a lie. Alan had been passionate about fairness once, back when they were young and idealistic, before greed and selfishness had corrupted him into something unrecognizable. During dinner, Lauren learned more about Elijah than she'd bargained for. He was planning to study law at Ute, specializing in financial crimes. He'd already been accepted early admission with a full scholarship. His essay about seeking justice for his family had apparently moved the admissions committee to tears. "I'm going to find out what happened to my grandfather," he said with quiet conviction as they finished their meal. "And when I do, I'm going to make sure the people responsible pay for what they did, not just the money they stole, but the lives they destroyed." "What if the people responsible are already dead?" Lauren asked carefully. "What if they died in that same time period?" Elijah's smile was sharp, almost predatory. "Then I'll make sure the world knows what they did. I'll expose their crimes, ruin their reputations, make sure their names are synonymous with betrayal and theft. Death doesn't get you off the hook for destroying innocent families." Lauren's blood ran cold. If Elijah ever discovered that Leonard Blackwood was really Alan Carter, that his grandfather's business partner was alive and thriving. "Elijah," Luna said gently, "you can't spend your whole life hunting ghosts. Sometimes you have to let the past go and focus on building something better." "Easy for you to say," Elijah replied, "but not unkindly. Your dad was a good man who died in an accident. Mine killed himself because he couldn't live with what was done to our family. There's a difference between grief and injustice. If only you knew," Lauren thought. "If only you knew that your story and Luna's story are more connected than you could ever imagine." After dinner, the two teenagers spread their chemistry textbooks across the living room floor, working on a project about molecular structures. Lauren watched them from the kitchen as she cleaned up, struck by how natural they looked together. Two brilliant kids who'd been forced to grow up too fast, finding comfort in each other's understanding. "Your mom's really cool," she heard Elijah tell Luna. "She actually listens when I talk about my dad. Most adults get uncomfortable and try to change the subject." "She's the best," Luna agreed. "Sometimes I think she works too hard, though. She's been traveling a lot for work lately, taking these live-in positions with rich families. I worry she's wearing herself out." "What kind of families?" "You know, the usual rich people stuff. Big houses, fancy parties, more money than they know what to do with. She says the work is easy, but the people can be challenging." Lauren's hand stilled on the dish she was washing. She hadn't told Luna any specifics about the Blackwood job, just that she'd taken a temporary position in California that paid well. "I bet," Elijah said. "My grandparents always say that money doesn't buy class. Some of the richest people they know are also the most morally bankrupt." "Exactly. Mom says you can tell a lot about people by how they treat their staff. The really wealthy ones, the ones who earn their money honestly, they're usually pretty decent, but the ones who got rich through shortcuts or hurting other people, they treat everyone around them like they're disposable." Lauren's throat tightened. Luna's insight was more accurate than she realized. Leonard and Rachel Blackwood treated their staff like well-trained pets, useful, but ultimately replaceable and unworthy of real consideration. When Elijah left that evening, he shook Lauren's hand again and thanked her for dinner with the same careful politeness he'd shown earlier. But as he turned to go, he paused. "Mrs. Evans, I hope you don't mind me saying this, but Luna's lucky to have you. Not every parent would sacrifice so much for their kid's future. Whatever you're doing to make sure she has opportunities, it's working. She's going to change the world someday." After he left, Lauren sat in her living room, surrounded by the detritus of a normal teenage evening. Textbooks, empty soda cans, Luna's chemistry notes scattered across the coffee table. It was such an ordinary scene, the kind of thing she'd dreamed about during all those years of struggling to give Luna a normal life. But nothing about this was normal. Her daughter was falling for the grandson of the man her father had helped destroy. That same father was alive, wealthy, and completely unaware that the threads of his past were weaving themselves into an inescapable net, and Lauren was caught in the middle, holding secrets that could destroy everyone she loved. Her phone buzzed with a text from Catherine. "Mrs. Blackwood wants to discuss the dinner party schedule when you return. Mr. Blackwood is planning something special for their anniversary." Their anniversary. The celebration of a marriage built on theft, murder, and betrayal. Lauren looked at Luna, who was still glowing from her evening with Elijah, and made a decision. It was time to accelerate her timeline, before Luna got in any deeper. Before Elijah's quest for justice led him somewhere dangerous. Before the web of lies became so tangled that innocent people got hurt. Leonard Blackwood was going to pay for his crimes, and Lauren was going to make sure justice was served. Not just for herself and Luna, but for Julian Morgan, his son, and the brilliant boy who deserved to know the truth about his family, even if it destroyed everything she'd built in the process. Lauren returned to Beverly Hills on a Sunday evening, her mind still reeling from meeting Elijah Morgan. The contrast between her modest Austin apartment and the Blackwood mansion felt more jarring than ever. Every marble surface and crystal chandelier, a reminder of the stolen fortune that had built this empire of lies. Catherine met her at the door with her usual efficiency. "Mrs. Blackwood wants to see you first thing in the morning. They're planning their anniversary celebration for next month, and she has specific requirements." Anniversary. Lauren's stomach clenched. 8 years of marriage built on murder and theft, and they were going to celebrate it with champagne and caviar. That night, alone in her staff quarters, Lauren opened her laptop and searched for more information about Julian Morgan's death. What she found made her blood run cold. The accident had occurred on Highway 35, just outside Austin. Julian's car had veered off the road at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday night. A night when, according to old business records Lauren had found, he'd been scheduled to meet with his accountant about irregularities in the company books. The investigating officer's report was brief. Driver appeared to have fallen asleep at the wheel. No evidence of mechanical failure or foul play. Blood alcohol level was 0. Victim likely succumbed to fatigue after a long day of work. But Lauren found something else buried in the local newspaper archives. A small follow-up article that ran 3 days after the accident. Julian's secretary had been quoted saying that her boss had seemed agitated and suspicious in the weeks before his death, that he'd been working late most nights reviewing financial documents and making concerning discoveries about missing funds. The article also mentioned that Julian had scheduled a meeting with the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit for the Friday after his death, a meeting that would never take place. Lauren sat back in her chair, pieces of the puzzle clicking into place. Julian had discovered Alan's embezzlement. He'd been preparing to expose his business partner to federal authorities, and 3 days before that meeting could happen, he died in a convenient accident. Her hands shook as she closed the laptop. This wasn't just theft and fraud. This was murder. The next morning, Lauren stood outside Rachel's dressing room, waiting to be summoned. Through the closed door, she could hear Rachel on the phone with what sounded like a party planner. "No, absolutely not. The flowers must be white roses, not ivory. There's a difference, and I expect you to know that. Yes, the same caterer from the Morrison wedding. They know how to handle our dietary restrictions. Leonard wants the guest list kept small, just our closest friends, about 50 people." When Rachel finally called her in, Lauren found her seated at an ornate vanity table, surrounded by bottles of expensive skincare products and jewelry boxes that probably contained more wealth than most people saw in a lifetime. "Ms. Morgan, thank you for being so flexible with your schedule. I know the back and forth travel can't be easy." "It's no problem at all, Mrs. Blackwood. I'm grateful for the opportunity." Rachel smiled, but there was something calculating in her expression. "You know, Catherine mentioned that you're a widow. I hope you don't mind me asking, but how long has it been since your husband passed?" The question felt like a trap, though Lauren couldn't understand why. 3 years, ma'am. And you have children. A daughter. She's 17, a senior in high school. How lovely. Is she planning to attend college?" "Yes, ma'am, she's very bright. She wants to study medicine." Rachel's reflection in the mirror seemed to study Lauren more intently. "Medicine is expensive. Even with scholarships, the costs can be overwhelming for a single mother. Lauren's pulse quickened. Where was this conversation going? "We'll manage," she said carefully. "We always have. I'm sure you will. You strike me as a very resourceful woman." Rachel turned from the mirror to face Lauren directly. "The reason I ask is that Leonard and I have been discussing establishing a scholarship fund. We're looking for deserving students who've overcome significant hardship. Perhaps your daughter might be interested." The offer hung in the air between them, loaded with implications Lauren didn't understand. Why would Rachel Blackwood offer to help a stranger's daughter? What did she want in return? "That's very generous, Mrs. Blackwood. But Luna's already receiving financial aid for her current school. St. Catherine's, isn't it?" Lauren's blood turned to ice. She'd never mentioned Luna's school to anyone in the Blackwood household. Yes. How did you know?" Rachel's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Leonard has many business connections in Austin. When I mentioned we had a new housekeeper with a daughter at a prestigious school there, he was curious. He has great respect for academic achievement." The words sounded innocent enough, but Lauren felt like a mouse being circled by a cat. Had Leonard somehow discovered who she really was? Was this all an elaborate game, with Luna as the pawn? "I should mention," Rachel continued casually, "that Leonard will be dining at home tonight. He's been traveling so much lately. He wants a quiet evening. I'll be at a charity board meeting, so it will just be the two of you. Just the two of them." After 10 years of believing her husband was dead, Lauren would be alone with him for an entire evening. "Of course, Mrs. Blackwood. What would he prefer for dinner?" "Something simple. Leonard's tastes have always been quite modest. Despite his success, a good steak perhaps with roasted vegetables, he enjoys a nice red wine with his meal. There's a Cabernet in the cellar that should work perfectly." As Rachel continued discussing menu details, Lauren's mind raced. This felt orchestrated, like pieces being moved into position on a chessboard. But for what endgame? That evening, Lauren prepared Leonard's dinner with meticulous care. Every detail had to be perfect. Not because she wanted to please him, but because she needed him relaxed and unsuspecting for what she was planning. She'd hidden a small recording device in the dining room earlier, tucked behind a picture frame where the audio would be clear, but the device invisible. Tonight, she was going to get Leonard talking about his business, his past, his methods, and she was going to record every incriminating word. At 7 o'clock sharp, Leonard entered the dining room. He'd changed from his business suit into casual slacks and a white button-down shirt. And for a moment, Lauren was transported back 15 years to their early dating days, when he'd dress exactly like this for their dinner dates. "Ms. Morgan," he said, settling into his chair. "This looks excellent, thank you." "You're welcome, sir." Lauren served the wine, her hands steady despite her racing heart. "Will there be anything else?" "Actually, yes. Would you join me for a moment? I hate eating alone, and Rachel won't be back for hours." Lauren's pulse spiked. This was definitely not normal employer behavior. "I couldn't, sir. It wouldn't be appropriate." "Nonsense, we're both adults, and I'd appreciate the company. Please sit." It wasn't really a request. Lauren took the seat across from him, hyper-aware of every movement, every expression that crossed his face. Leonard took a sip of wine and studied her over the rim of his glass. "You know, there's something about you that seems familiar. Have we met somewhere before?" Lauren forced herself to meet his gaze. "I don't believe so, sir. I think I'd remember meeting someone like you. Someone like me. Successful, powerful. I don't usually move in those circles." Leonard laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Success is relative, Mrs. Morgan. Sometimes the things we do to achieve it, well, let's just say the price can be higher than we anticipated." "What do you mean?" He took another sip of wine, his eyes never leaving her face. "I built this company from nothing. Absolutely nothing. When I started, I had no money, no connections, no safety net, just determination and a willingness to do whatever it took to succeed. That's admirable, is it?" Leonard leaned forward slightly. "What if I told you that success sometimes requires making hard choices? Choices that hurt people you care about?" Lauren's mouth went dry. Was he confessing? Testing her? "I suppose everyone has regrets." "Regrets." Leonard rolled the word around his mouth like he was tasting it. "Yes, I have those. But I also have results. This house, this life, this empire. None of it would exist if I hadn't been willing to sacrifice everything for it. Everything? My past? My identity? The man I used to be. His voice dropped to almost a whisper. Sometimes I wonder what happened to the people I left behind. Whether they moved on. Whether they're happy. Whether they ever think about me. Lauren's heart was hammering so hard she was sure he could hear it. Do you ever think about going back? Making amends? To whom? Leonard's laugh was bitter. The dead don't need apologies, Mrs. Morgan. And the living are better off without the truth. The words hit Lauren like a physical blow. He thought she was dead. After all these years, all this pain, he genuinely believed that his wife and daughter had somehow died along with his old identity. You look pale, Leonard observed. Are you feeling all right? Lauren stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the hardwood floor. I should clear the dishes. Ms. Morgan? Leonard's voice stopped her at the doorway when she turned back. His green eyes were boring into hers with an intensity that made her knees weak. Have we really never met before? For a long moment, they stared at each other across the elegant dining room. Lauren saw confusion in his expression, and something else, a flicker of recognition that he couldn't quite place. No, sir, she whispered. We've never met. But even as she said it, she saw the exact moment when the pieces clicked into place in his mind. His face went white, his wine glass slipping from nerveless fingers to shatter against the floor. Lauren, he breathed, and her name on his lips sounded like a prayer and a curse all at once. My God, Lauren, you're alive. The pretense was over. The game had been revealed, and Lauren Carter was finally face to face with the husband who destroyed her life. The silence stretched between them like a taut wire ready to snap. Leonard, Allen, stared at Lauren as if she were a ghost materialized from his worst nightmares. The wine spread across the marble floor like blood, dark and accusatory. You're supposed to be dead, he whispered, his voice hoarse with shock. You and Luna both. The fire. You thought wrong. Lauren's voice was steady, cold as winter morning. We survived. Barely. Do you want to know what that was like, Allen? Do you want to know what it was like to identify a body so burned it was unrecognizable? To bury a man I thought was my husband while pregnant with his child? Allen's face crumpled. Pregnant? But Luna was 5 years old when you died, Lauren finished. But there was another baby, Allen. A baby I lost 3 months after your funeral because the stress and poverty were too much. Your son? The son you never even knew existed. The words hit him like physical blows. Allen grabbed the edge of the table, his knuckles white with strain. Lauren, I didn't know. You have to believe me. I never meant for what? For us to suffer while you built an empire on stolen money. For Luna to grow up thinking her father was dead while he was playing house with his new wife. Lauren stepped closer, her voice rising. Or maybe you didn't mean for Julian Morgan to die before he could expose you to the FBI. Allen's face went ashen. How do you know about Julian? I know everything, Allen. I know about the embezzlement. I know about the forged documents and the bribed officials. I know you murdered Julian Morgan and made it look like an accident. I didn't murder anyone. Allen shot to his feet, the chair toppling behind him. Julian's death was an accident. A terrible, tragic accident that happened at the worst possible time. Lauren laughed bitterly. How convenient. 3 days before he was supposed to meet with federal agents about missing funds from your company. What are the odds? You don't understand, Allen said desperately. The business was failing. We were about to lose everything. The company, the house, Luna's college fund. I was trying to save us. By stealing from your business partner. By borrowing from company accounts. I was going to pay it back, I swear. But then Julian started asking questions, getting suspicious. He was going to destroy everything before I could fix it. Lauren stared at him in disgust. So you decided to destroy him first? No, I tried to reason with him. The night he died, I followed him from the office, trying to convince him to give me more time. But he wouldn't listen. He said he was going to the authorities the next morning, that he couldn't let me drag him down with me. So you killed him? I tried to stop him from leaving. Allen's voice cracked. We argued on the side of the road. He got back in his car, and I might have grabbed the steering wheel. He swerved, and the car went off the embankment. It happened so fast. Lauren, I tried to help him, but it was too late. The confession hung in the air between them, raw and damning. Lauren felt a mixture of vindication and revulsion wash over her. And then you decided to fake your own death rather than face the consequences. Alan collapsed back into his chair, his head in his hands. I panicked. Julian was dead. The FBI was going to investigate, and I knew they'd find evidence of the missing money. I had maybe days before everything came crashing down. So you found a homeless man's body and burned down your office around it. He was already dead, Alan said quietly. I found him behind the building. Overdose, probably, I thought. I thought if everyone believed I was dead too, the investigation would stop. You and Luna would be safe from the scandal. Safe? Lauren's voice dripped with venom. You call 10 years of poverty and struggle safe. You call Luna wearing secondhand clothes and eating ramen noodles for dinner safe. I left money for you. Insurance policies, the house, which was seized to pay your debts. Debts that mysteriously appeared after your death, let me guess. You created fake creditors to claim everything we owned, making sure there was nothing left for your inconvenient family. Alan's silence was confirmation enough. And then what? Lauren continued. You changed your identity, moved to California, and started over with your stolen fortune. I met Rachel at a grief counseling group, Alan said miserably. She was mourning Julian, and I was mourning the man I used to be. We understood each other's pain, except her pain was real, and yours was an act. It wasn't an act. Alan looked up at her with desperate eyes. Do you think this has been easy for me? Do you think a day goes by that I don't think about you and Luna? About the life we had? Then why didn't you come back? Why didn't you find a way to contact us? Because I couldn't. Don't you see? Alan Carter was dead. Legally. Officially dead. If I surfaced, there would be investigations, questions. Julian's death would be reopened. Rachel would learn the truth about who I really am. Poor Rachel, Lauren said sarcastically. I suppose she has no idea she's married to a murderer and a thief. I'm not a murderer, Alan insisted. Julian's death was an accident. Everything that happened after was about survival, about building something better from the ashes of my mistakes. Lauren reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone, stopping the recording app she'd started when she entered the room. Well, congratulations. Alan, you've just confessed to manslaughter, insurance fraud, identity theft, and a dozen other felonies, all recorded in crystal clear audio. Alan's face went white. Lauren, you can't what? Turn in the man who destroyed my life, who murdered his business partner and abandoned his family. Lauren's laugh was sharp as broken glass. Watch me. Please. Alan stood and moved toward her, his hands outstretched in supplication. Think about what this will do to Luna, to you. If the truth comes out, everyone will know. The media will tear your lives apart. Our lives were already torn apart 10 years ago by you. And Rachel? Alan continued desperately. She's innocent in all this. She lost her first husband, and now you want to destroy her second marriage too. She doesn't deserve this. Neither did Julian Morgan. Neither did his son who killed himself trying to clear his father's name. Neither did Elijah, who spent his entire life wondering what happened to his family. Alan froze. Elijah, Julian's grandson, a brilliant 17-year-old boy who's determined to find justice for his family. He's studying law, Alan, specializing in financial crimes, and he's very, very close to figuring out what really happened to his grandfather. How do you know about Elijah? Lauren smiled coldly. Because he's dating Luna. They go to school together at St. Catherine's. The same school Luna mysteriously received a scholarship to attend. Small world, isn't it? Alan staggered backward as if she'd struck him. Luna's dating Julian's grandson. Ironic, don't you think? The children of your victims finding each other, falling for each other, while you play the successful businessman 3 states away. Lauren, you have to stop this. If Elijah finds out who I am, he'll what? Seek justice for his family. Expose the truth about what you did. Sounds terrifying for you. Alan was breathing hard now, sweat beading on his forehead. You don't understand what you're playing with. If this comes out, it won't just destroy me. It'll destroy Luna too. Do you want her to learn that her father is a criminal? That everything she believes about him is a lie? Lauren had been dreading this moment. The moment when Alan would use Luna as a weapon against her. But she was ready for it. Luna already knows her father is dead, she said quietly. Alan Carter died 10 years ago in that fire. The man standing in front of me is Leonard Blackwood, a stranger who happens to share some DNA with my daughter. That's not true, and you know it, isn't it? Lauren stepped closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. Here's something else you should know, Alan. Something that might make you reconsider how much you want to claim paternity of Luna. She reached into her purse and pulled out a folded piece of paper. DNA test results she'd ordered weeks ago using hair samples from Alan's bathroom and strands from Luna's brush she'd brought from Austin. What is this? Alan asked, though his face suggested he already knew. DNA test results. Yours and Luna's. Lauren's smile was sharp as a blade. Want to know what they revealed? Alan's hands shook as he unfolded the paper. Lauren watched his face crumble as he read the results. Watched the last piece of his world shatter. Probability of paternity, 0%. He read aloud, his voice barely audible. That's right, Alan. Luna isn't your daughter, she never was. The truth hit him like a physical blow. He sank into his chair, the paper falling from nerveless fingers. But how? Remember our rough patch about 6 months before you died? When we were fighting about money and you were staying late at the office every night? Lauren's voice was steady, clinical. I was lonely, scared, and convinced my marriage was falling apart. Julian Morgan was kind to me when I came to the office looking for you. He listened when I cried about our problems. One thing led to another. Alan stared at her in horror. Julian is Luna's father. Was. Luna's father died in that car crash you caused. She's been mourning the wrong man her entire life. The revelation destroyed what was left of Alan's composure. He buried his face in his hands, his shoulders shaking with what might have been sobs or laughter. Lauren couldn't tell which. So you see, she continued mercilessly, you didn't just steal Julian's money and murder him. You stole 15 years of his daughter's life. Luna should have grown up knowing her real father, being raised by the Morgan family, inheriting the life that was rightfully hers. Does she know? Alan whispered. Not yet, but she will. And so will Elijah. And so will the world. Lauren turned to leave, but Alan's voice stopped her at the doorway. What do you want, Lauren? Money? I can give you anything you need. A trust fund for Luna, a house, whatever you want. Just don't destroy everything I've built. Lauren looked back at him, this broken man who had once been her husband, who had fathered no children but destroyed so many lives. What I want, Alan, is justice. For Julian, for his son, for Elijah, for Luna, and for me. And for yourself. What about revenge? Lauren's smile was cold as winter steel. Justice and revenge in this case happened to be the same thing. 3 days later, Lauren was arranging white roses in the foyer when she heard the front gate's security system chime. Through the window, she watched a black Honda Civic pull up the circular driveway, a car that looked distinctly out of place among the usual parade of Bentleys and Mercedes. Her blood turned to ice when she saw who stepped out. Elijah Morgan moved with the determined stride of someone on a mission. He wore dark jeans and a white t-shirt, but there was something different about him, a hardness in his posture that hadn't been there during their dinner in Austin. In his right hand, he carried a manila envelope. Lauren's phone buzzed with a frantic text from Luna. Mom, I've been trying to reach Elijah all day. He missed school and won't answer my calls. His grandparents are worried sick. They said he took some old papers from his dad's things and just disappeared. The front doorbell rang, its melodic chimes echoing through the marble entryway. Lauren smoothed her uniform and opened the door, forcing her face into the neutral expression of professional service. Can I help you? She asked, as if she'd never seen him before. Elijah's brown eyes, so much like Julian's, fixed on her with laser intensity. I need to speak with Leonard Blackwood now. I'm sorry, but Mr. Blackwood is in meetings all afternoon. If you'd like to make an appointment, tell him Elijah Morgan is here. The boy interrupted, his voice carrying a steel that reminded Lauren painfully of his grandfather. Tell him I know who he really is. Lauren's heart hammered against her ribs. This was happening too fast, spiraling out of control before she could implement her carefully laid plans. Young man, I think there's been some confusion. There's no confusion. Elijah held up the manila envelope. I have my father's research, every document, every photograph, every piece of evidence he collected before he died, including this. He pulled out a black and white photograph and held it where Lauren could see it. The image showed two men in hard hats standing in front of a construction site. One was unmistakably Julian Morgan. The other was Alan Carter, 10 years younger, but undeniably recognizable. "My father knew," Elijah said quietly. "He figured it out right before he killed himself. Leonard Blackwood is Alan Carter. Your boss is the man who destroyed my family." Lauren stared at the photograph, her mind racing. "I think you should leave." "No." Elijah pushed past her into the foyer, his eyes scanning the opulent surroundings with obvious disgust. "I'm not leaving until I get answers. My grandfather is dead because of that man. My father is dead because of that man. I've spent 3 years digging through records, following money trails, connecting dots, and it all leads here. Elijah, please. How do you know my name?" The question was sharp, suspicious. "I never told you my name." Before Lauren could answer, footsteps echoed from the marble staircase. Alan appeared at the top of the stairs, having obviously heard the commotion. When he saw Elijah standing in his foyer, his face went white as bone. "You," Elijah breathed, his voice filled with a decade of grief and rage. "You're him. You're really him." Alan descended the stairs slowly, like a man walking to his execution. "Elijah, isn't it? You look just like your grandfather. Don't you dare talk about him." Elijah's hands clenched into fists. "Don't you dare speak his name after what you did. What I did." Alan reached the bottom of the stairs, keeping his distance from the furious teenager. "And what exactly do you think I did? I think you embezzled money from Morgan Carter Construction. I think you killed my grandfather when he found out. And I think you faked your own death to escape justice." Alan's laugh was hollow. "You've been busy. My father was busy. He spent the last years of his life trying to prove my grandfather's innocence, trying to find the partner who disappeared with company funds. He never stopped believing that someday, somehow, the truth would come out." "And what truth is that?" Elijah pulled more documents from the envelope. Bank statements, police reports, newspaper clippings. The truth that Julian Morgan wasn't a criminal. The truth that you framed him for your crimes, and then murdered him to keep him quiet. Your grandfather's death was an accident, Alan said carefully. "Bullshit." Elijah's composure cracked, revealing the angry, grieving boy beneath. "You were seen arguing with him that night. A witness saw 2 men on the side of Highway 35 just before the crash, but that witness disappeared before he could talk to police. Funny how that happens around you." Lauren watched the confrontation unfold, torn between admiration for Elijah's determination and terror at how this might end. The boy was playing with forces beyond his understanding, cornering a desperate man who'd already killed once. "You don't understand the situation," Alan said, his voice taking on a pleading tone. "Your grandfather was a good man, but he was naive about business. The construction industry is brutal, competitive. Sometimes you have to make hard choices, like stealing, like murder, like survival." Alan's mask slipped, revealing the desperation beneath. "The company was hemorrhaging money. We were going to lose everything. I did what I had to do to save it. You did what you had to do to save yourself," Elijah shot back. "And when my grandfather threatened to expose you, you killed him. It was an accident. Then why did you fake your death? Why did you steal his identity and his money? Why did you let my father spend years thinking his father was a criminal?" Alan opened his mouth to respond, but Elijah wasn't finished. "My father killed himself because of you," the boy continued, his voice breaking. "He couldn't live with the shame of what he thought my grandfather had done. He spent every penny we had trying to clear the family name, trying to prove that Julian Morgan wasn't a thief, and all the while you were living in luxury, building an empire on stolen money." The words hung in the air like accusations written in fire. Lauren saw Alan flinch with each one, saw the weight of his crimes finally crushing down on him. "Elijah," she said softly, stepping closer to the boy, "there's something else you need to know." Both men turned to look at her, Alan with dawning horror, Elijah with confusion. "Who are you?" Elijah asked. "You're not just a housekeeper, are you?" Lauren took a deep breath. The moment of truth had arrived, ready or not. "My name is Lauren Carter," she said. "I was married to the man you know as Leonard Blackwood. I'm Alan Carter's wife." Elijah staggered backward as if she'd struck him. "You're married to him. You're part of this." "I thought he was dead," Lauren said quickly. "For 10 years. I believed my husband died in a fire. I raised my daughter alone, worked 3 jobs to keep us afloat, never knowing that he was alive and living like a king. Your daughter? Elijah's eyes widened with understanding. Luna. Luna is his daughter. Lauren felt Alan's gaze burning into her, warning her to stay silent. But the time for silence was over. No, she said quietly. Luna isn't Alan's daughter. She's Julian's. The words exploded between them like a grenade. Elijah's face went through a series of expressions. Confusion, disbelief, and finally, stunned recognition. Julian's, but that means Luna is your aunt, Lauren confirmed. Julian Morgan was her father. You and Luna are family. Elijah, blood family. Alan made a sound like a wounded animal. Lauren, don't what? She turned on him with fury. Don't tell this boy that his grandfather had a daughter, that Luna has been mourning the wrong father her entire life, that she should have grown up knowing her real family instead of struggling in poverty. Elijah was staring at them both, the manila envelope forgotten in his hands. Luna is my grandfather's daughter. But how? When? Your grandfather and I had an affair, Lauren said simply. My marriage to Alan was falling apart. Julian was kind to me, and I was lonely. It only happened once, but that was enough. Does Luna know? Not yet. I only recently discovered the truth myself. Elijah looked at Alan with new understanding. That's why you faked your death. It wasn't just about the embezzlement. You found out Luna wasn't yours. I didn't know, Alan said quietly. Not then. I only learned the truth 3 days ago. But you suspected, Lauren said. That's why you were so willing to abandon us, because deep down, you knew Luna didn't belong to you. The 3 of them stood in the opulent foyer, surrounded by marble and crystal, while the truth settled around them like dust from a collapsed building. I want proof, Elijah said finally. DNA evidence, legally admissible proof that my grandfather was Luna's father. I have it, Lauren said. I had tests done. Julian Morgan was definitely Luna's biological father. Elijah closed his eyes, and for a moment, he looked much younger than his 17 years. My grandfather had a daughter he never knew about, and she's been struggling all these years while his killer lived in luxury. Elijah, Alan said desperately, think about what you're planning to do. Think about the consequences. If you expose this, it won't just destroy me. It'll destroy Rachel, who's innocent in all this. It'll destroy Luna's life, turn her into a media spectacle. Is your need for revenge worth that? Elijah opened his eyes, and Lauren saw Julian's determination blazing in them. This isn't about revenge, he said quietly. It's about justice and family. He turned to Lauren. When are you going to tell Luna the truth? Soon. I wanted to gather all the evidence first, make sure I could prove everything. Good, because I think it's time my aunt knew who her real family is. Elijah pulled out his phone and started dialing. Who are you calling? Lauren asked. My lawyer, Elijah said grimly. And then the FBI. It's time to finish what my grandfather started. Alan lunged toward the boy, desperation making him reckless. You can't. Lauren stepped between them, her voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. Yes, he can. And he will. Because the truth has a way of surfacing, Alan. No matter how deep you try to bury it. The FBI agents arrived exactly 47 minutes after Elijah's phone call. Lauren watched from the living room window as 3 black SUVs pulled through the security gates, their occupants moving with the precise efficiency of people who'd done this many times before. Special Agent Sarah Chen knocked on the front door at 4:23 p.m., her badge gleaming in the afternoon sunlight. Behind her stood Agent Martinez and Agent Foster, along with 2 forensic specialists carrying equipment cases. Ms. Carter, Agent Chen addressed Lauren directly. I'm Special Agent Chen, FBI Financial Crimes Division. We understand you have information regarding the Leonard Blackwood investigation. I do. Lauren's voice was steady, though her hands trembled slightly as she handed over the flash drive containing her recorded confession from Alan and copies of all the documents she'd gathered. Everything you need is on here. Agent Chen pocketed the drive. Where is Mr. Blackwood now? In his office, he's been on the phone with lawyers for the past hour. And Mrs. Blackwood, at her sister's house in Malibu. She doesn't know any of this yet. Agent Chen nodded grimly. We'll need to speak with her as well. Financial crimes of this magnitude often involve multiple parties. Lauren felt a pang of sympathy for Rachel. Whatever her faults, she truly seemed to have no knowledge of her husband's real identity or his crimes. She was about to lose everything: her marriage, her lifestyle, her reputation, through no fault of her own. "Agent Chen?" Elijah spoke up from where he sat on the white leather sofa, his grandfather's research papers spread across the coffee table. "I want to be present when you arrest him. I've been waiting for this moment for 3 years. Son, I understand your feelings, but my grandfather was Julian Morgan. This man destroyed my family. I have a right to see justice served." Agent Chen studied the 17-year-old's determined face. "Very well, but you follow our lead and stay back unless instructed otherwise." The walk to Alan's office felt like a funeral procession. Lauren's feet moved automatically across the marble floors, past the expensive artwork and crystal vases, toward the confrontation that would end everything. Alan looked up when they entered, his face ashen but unsurprised. He'd changed into a dark suit, armor for the battle he knew was coming. On his desk sat an open laptop, several legal documents, and a half-empty glass of scotch. "Mr. Blackwood," Agent Chen began. "Or should I say Mr. Carter, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, embezzlement, money laundering, and obstruction of justice. And murder," Elijah added quietly. "Don't forget murder." Agent Chen glanced at the boy. "That will be determined by further investigation. But yes, potentially homicide as well." Alan stood slowly, his hands raised in surrender. "I want to make a statement," he said. "I want to confess to everything. Sir, you have the right to remain silent. I don't want to remain silent." Alan's voice was hollow, defeated. "I've been silent for 10 years. It's time to tell the truth." Agent Martinez stepped forward with handcuffs, but Alan shook his head. "Please, let me say what I need to say first. Let me try to make this right." He looked directly at Elijah, and Lauren saw genuine remorse in his green eyes for the first time since this nightmare began. "Your grandfather was a good man," Alan said quietly. "Better than me in every way. He trusted me, considered me family, and I betrayed that trust because I was weak and greedy and afraid." Elijah's jaw tightened, but he remained silent. "I started taking money from the company accounts because we were hemorrhaging cash on a bad project. I told myself it was temporary, that I'd pay it back when things turned around. But instead of getting better, things got worse. The amounts got bigger. The lies got more complicated." Agent Chen was recording everything on her phone, taking notes with practiced efficiency. When Julian started asking questions about the missing funds, I panicked. I tried to convince him to give me more time, to trust me one more time, but he'd lost faith in me. He said he was going to the FBI. "So you killed him," Elijah said, his voice barely controlled. "I followed him that night. We argued on the side of Highway 35. I grabbed his arm, tried to keep him from getting back in his car. We struggled, and I might have. The steering wheel." Alan's voice broke. "I never meant for him to die. It was an accident, but it was my fault. And then you decided to cover it up. I found the homeless man's body behind our office building. Drug overdose, the coroner determined later. I put him in my office. Made sure he had my wallet, my wedding ring. Then I set the fire and disappeared. Agent Foster was photographing everything. The office, the documents. Alan himself as he confessed to a decade of crimes. The money Julian had discovered missing. Where did it go?" Agent Chen asked. "Offshore accounts. I used it to establish Leonard Blackwood's identity, to start the new construction company. Everything I built, every success I had, was founded on that stolen money. What about the witness who saw you arguing with Julian Morgan?" Alan's face darkened. "Marcus Holloway, a trucker who stopped to help what he thought was a disabled vehicle. He saw too much. What happened to Mr. Holloway? I paid him to disappear, $50,000 to leave town and never speak about what he'd seen. He's living in Mexico now, as far as I know." Elijah made a sound of disgust. "You bought his silence while my father killed himself thinking his dad was a criminal." "I'm sorry," Alan said, and the words seemed to come from the depths of his soul. "I'm sorry about your father, about the pain your family endured. If I could undo it all. But you can't," Elijah interrupted. "My grandfather is dead. My father is dead. And my aunt grew up in poverty while you lived like a king. Your aunt, Luna. Julian Morgan's daughter, the girl you thought was yours for 15 years. Alan closed his eyes, the final piece of his destruction complete. Agent Martinez stepped forward again with the handcuffs. Sir, we need to take you into custody now. Wait, Lauren said. She'd been silent throughout the confession. But now she stepped closer to the man who'd once been her husband. I need to ask you something, Alan. Did you ever love me? Or was I just another victim in your web of lies? Alan looked at her with eyes full of regret. I loved you, Lauren. That was real. But I loved the idea of success more. I loved the respect and power that money could buy. I chose my ambition over my family, and I'll regret that for the rest of my life. Which won't be very long, Agent Chen said grimly. Financial crimes of this magnitude carry sentences of 25 to life. Add in the manslaughter charge, and you'll likely die in prison. As the handcuffs clicked into place, Alan looked one last time at Elijah. Your grandfather would be proud of you. You have his integrity, his determination. Use those gifts to build something better than what I destroyed. I intend to, Elijah replied, starting with making sure Luna knows the truth about her real father. The arrest took another hour. Agents photographed documents, seized computers, and began the process of freezing the Blackwood assets. Lauren provided detailed statements about everything she'd discovered, everything she'd recorded. As they led Alan away, he paused at the front door and looked back at the mansion that had been his palace of lies. Lauren, he called out, tell Luna. Tell her I'm sorry for everything. Then he was gone, disappeared into the back of an FBI vehicle that would carry him toward justice 10 years overdue. Agent Chen approached Lauren as the last of the vehicles prepared to depart. Ms. Carter, you'll need to remain available for testimony when this goes to trial. Your evidence was crucial to building this case. Of course, but what happens now? To Rachel, to the assets, to everything. The courts will sort it out. Mrs. Blackwood will likely keep whatever she brought to the marriage, but everything else will be seized as proceeds from criminal activity. There will be a fund established for the victims' families. Elijah overheard and stepped closer. The Morgan family fortune that was stolen. Will it be returned? Whatever can be traced and recovered. Yes, your family was the primary victim here. You and Miss Carter's daughter will likely be the main beneficiaries. After the agents left, Lauren and Elijah sat in the empty mansion, surrounded by the echoes of a life built on lies. I need to call Luna, Lauren said. She needs to hear this from me before it hits the news. Can I be there when you tell her? About Julian being her father? I mean, she's going to need family around her when she learns the truth. Lauren smiled through her tears. I think Julian would like that. His children. Finally together. As the sun set over Beverly Hills, casting long shadows through the mansion's floor-to-ceiling windows, Lauren pulled out her phone to make the most important call of her life. Justice had been served. The truth had been revealed. Now came the harder task. Healing the wounds that a decade of lies had created. 5 years later, the morning sun streamed through the tall windows of the Julian Morgan Foundation offices in downtown Austin, casting warm light across the reception area where a bronze plaque read, "Dedicated to supporting families affected by financial crimes and helping them rebuild their lives with dignity." Lauren Carter Morgan stood in her corner office, reviewing grant applications over her first cup of coffee. At 40, she carried herself with the quiet confidence of a woman who had faced the worst life could offer and emerged stronger. The worry lines that had creased her face during those lean years had softened, though they hadn't entirely disappeared. They served as reminders of where she'd come from. "Mom," Luna's voice called from the hallway. "The Channel 7 news crew is here for the interview." Lauren smiled as her daughter appeared in the doorway. Dr. Luna Morgan had just completed her residency at Dell Seton Medical Center and was about to start her fellowship in pediatric cardiology at 22. She had Julian's compassionate brown eyes and his unwavering determination to help others. "Are you ready for this?" Lauren asked, straightening Luna's white coat. "Once this documentary airs, everyone will know our story." "I'm ready," Luna said firmly. "People need to know that families can survive these kinds of tragedies, that justice might take time, but it's worth fighting for." They walked together toward the conference room where the camera crew was setting up. On the way, they passed the wall of photographs that told the Foundation's story, families who had been helped, children who had gone to college on scholarships, businesses that had been rebuilt after financial crimes destroyed them. In the center of the wall hung a large portrait of Julian Morgan, painted from photographs and family memories. Below it, a smaller frame held the only picture they had of all three generations together: Julian, Luna, and Elijah at Luna's medical school graduation 2 years ago. "Ready, ladies?" asked the producer, a kind woman named Sarah who had spent months researching their story. "We'll start with some background about the foundation, then move into the personal narrative." Lauren and Luna took their seats at the polished conference table. Through the window, they could see the Austin skyline, including the building where Carter Construction had once operated, now home to a nonprofit legal clinic that provided free services to victims of financial crimes. "Dr. Morgan," Sarah began, addressing Luna, "5 years ago, you discovered that the man you'd believed was your father was actually alive and had been living under a false identity. How did that revelation change your life?" Luna considered the question carefully, a habit she'd developed during her years in medical school when every word could mean the difference between life and death for a patient. "Initially, it was devastating," she said honestly. "Everything I believed about my family, my history, my identity, it all crumbled in a matter of hours. But then I learned about Julian Morgan, my biological father, and I realized I hadn't lost a parent. I'd gained one, a man whose memory and values I could actually be proud of. And you, Miss Carter Morgan," Sarah turned to Lauren, "you spent a decade believing your husband was dead while he built a billion-dollar empire. Many people might have been consumed by bitterness. How did you channel that pain into something positive?" Lauren's answer came without hesitation. "Julian taught me that the best way to honor someone's memory is to continue their work. He believed in using success to lift others up, not to build walls between yourself and the world. When we recovered his stolen assets, the choice of what to do with them was easy." The interview continued for another hour, covering the trial that had captivated the nation, Alan's conviction and subsequent death in prison from a heart attack, and the long process of healing that had brought them to this moment. After the crew left, Lauren and Luna were joined by Elijah, who had driven up from his law office in San Antonio where he specialized in prosecuting financial crimes. At 22, he had his grandfather's serious demeanor, but also his capacity for joy, something that had fully emerged after years of carrying the weight of family secrets. "How'd it go?" he asked, setting a box of case files on the conference table. "Good, I think," Luna replied, then grinned. "Though they kept asking about our unusual family dynamic." Elijah laughed. "Unusual is one way to put it. Uncle and niece who are the same age, raised apart, brought together by tragedy but bonded by blood and shared purpose. It had taken time for them to work out their relationship. The revelation that Luna was Julian's daughter had initially created awkwardness. Elijah had been romantically interested in her after all, but with counseling and patience, they'd found their footing as family. Elijah had become the protective older brother Luna had never had, while Luna had given Elijah the sense of family connection he'd lost when his father died. "Speaking of family," Elijah said, his tone becoming more serious, "I have news about the Davidson case." He opened one of the case files, revealing documents that Lauren recognized as similar to the evidence they'd gathered against Alan. "Remember the construction fraud ring we've been investigating? The one that's been targeting military families? The one in El Paso?" Lauren asked. "That's the one. We finally have enough evidence to make arrests. 3 executives, 2 government officials, and about $15 million in stolen funds. The parallels to what happened to us are uncanny." Luna studied the documents. "How many families were affected?" 47 that we know of. Some lost their homes, others their life savings. There's a widow with 3 kids who invested her husband's life insurance payout and lost everything." Lauren felt the familiar fire kindle in her chest, the same righteous anger that had sustained her through the darkest days of her own ordeal. "What do they need? Legal representation, financial support during the trial, and long-term assistance rebuilding their lives, the kind of help we wish had been available to us." "Consider it done," Lauren said without hesitation. "Draft a proposal for emergency assistance. We'll fast-track it through the board." This was how they operated now, as a family united by purpose, using their painful experience to help others navigate similar crises. The foundation had assisted over 200 families in 5 years, helping them with legal fees, temporary housing, counseling services, and educational scholarships for their children. "There's something else," Elijah said, his voice softer. "I've been thinking about what Grandpa Julian would say if he could see us now." Luna reached over and squeezed his hand. "He'd be proud. We took his worst nightmare, his murder, the destruction of his reputation, the theft of his life's work, and turned it into something that helps other families avoid the same fate. I think he'd also be amazed that his daughter became a doctor and his grandson became a prosecutor," Lauren added. "You're both living out his values in your own ways." As the afternoon wore on, they worked together, reviewing grant applications and planning the foundation's expansion into neighboring states. It was meaningful work, but Lauren sometimes caught herself thinking about the road that had brought them here. Rachel Blackwood had moved back to Dallas after the trial, working as a real estate agent and slowly rebuilding her life. She'd lost most of her assets in the seizure, but she'd also been freed from the elaborate lie that had been her marriage. She and Lauren had met once, at the trial, and had surprised everyone by embracing tearfully in the courthouse hallway, two women who had been manipulated by the same man, finding forgiveness for each other if not for him. The homeless man whose body Alan had used to fake his death had finally been properly identified through DNA testing. His name was Robert Chen, and he'd been a veteran struggling with addiction. Lauren had paid for a proper burial and worked with the VI to ensure he received the military honors he deserved. As the day wound down, Lauren found herself standing alone in the conference room, looking at Julian's portrait. Sometimes she wondered what their life would have been like if Alan hadn't destroyed everything. Would Julian have left his wife for her? Would they have raised Luna together? But those questions belonged to a different timeline, a different set of choices. In this reality, Julian's death had been the catalyst for something larger than any individual happiness, a legacy that would help countless families for generations to come. "Mom," Luna appeared beside her, following her gaze to the portrait. "Regrets?" "No," Lauren said firmly. Julian's death was a tragedy, and Alan's crimes were unforgivable. But what we built from that tragedy, this foundation, our family, the people we've helped, that's not something I could ever regret." Luna smiled and slipped her arm through her mother's. "He would have loved you, not just romantically. But as a person, you have the same fierce protection for family, the same need to fight for justice. And you have his heart," Lauren replied. "Every time you save a child's life in that hospital, you're honoring his memory." As they prepared to leave the office, Lauren's phone buzzed with a text from one of their success stories. A young man whose family had been devastated by financial fraud 5 years ago, and who had just graduated from law school on a foundation scholarship. Passed the bar exam, starting at the Diaz office next month in the white-collar crimes division. "Thank you for believing in me when I couldn't believe in myself." Lauren showed the message to Luna and Elijah, who both grinned. "That's 43, Elijah said, referring to the number of foundation scholarship recipients who had gone on to careers in law enforcement, social work, or other fields dedicated to helping victims of crime. 43 people who might never have had the chance without Julian's legacy." Lauren agreed. As they walked out into the Austin evening, Lauren felt a deep sense of peace. Justice had been served. Truth had been revealed. And from the ashes of tragedy, they had built something beautiful. Alan Carter had thought he could escape the consequences of his actions by faking his death and starting over. But in the end, his crimes had created something far more powerful than his stolen empire. A family united by love and purpose, dedicated to ensuring that other families wouldn't suffer as they had. "The dead don't need apologies," Alan had said all those years ago. But the living, Lauren had learned, sometimes needed something far more valuable: hope, justice, and the knowledge that even in the darkest moments, redemption was possible.